Hey guys, tonight we dive deep into a world 230 million years old, where skies don't just rain a little, they pour relentlessly, turning dry lands into vast swamps, upheaving ecosystems and carving new paths for life itself. Imagine you're trudging through humid, muggy air, your feet sinking into damp mud, as a relentless 2 million-year-long rainstorm reshapes the very planet beneath you. You probably won't survive this downpour, literally, but hey, that's part of why it's so fascinating. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop a comment telling me where you're tuning in from and what time it is in your part of the world right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself in the late Triassic period, a time when Earth is vastly different, yet somehow familiar. Continents are clustered together into a supercontinent called Pangaea. The air is dry, the sun blazes down on arid landscapes dotted with rugged mountains and sparse, hardy vegetation. Then, something extraordinary happens. Around 232 million years ago, the climate skyrockets into chaos, and a mysterious, prolonged wet phase begins that scientists now call the Carnian Pluvial Event. This isn't your typical rain shower. This is a global curtain of rain, storms, and flooding that lasts nearly 2 million years, a geological hiccup so massive it forever changes the evolutionary game. You can almost feel the atmosphere thickening as storms roll in, riverbanks burst, and entire ecosystems are drowned or transformed. The Carnian Pluvial is remembered as one of Earth's major climate twists, marking the transition from dry to humid conditions. It's like nature hitting a reset button, washing away older species and creating fresh landscapes ripe for newcomers, including your soon-to-be favorites, the dinosaurs. Historians and geologists still argue whether this rainstorm was triggered by volcanic eruptions or shifts in atmospheric carbon levels. You'll hear about carbon isotope spikes and vast flood basalts pouring out in the background, either a cause or a consequence of this wet upheaval. But no matter the debate, the outcome is clear. Life on Earth was under pressure, scrambling to adapt, survive, or vanish. Today, as you listen, imagine yourself walking through this ancient storm, feeling the relentless drumming of rain on leaves, the mud soaking your boots, and the whispers of ecosystems on the brink of radical transformation. That sense of uncertainty, danger, and possibility is what makes the Carnian Pluvial Event a perfect, if wet, bedtime story. You step further back into the world just before the rainstorm's curtain falls. Earth in the late Triassic, bathed in heat and dryness. Picture endless deserts stretching into the horizon, oases far and few between, and skies that offer little mercy, baking the land below with relentless sunlight. The supercontinent Pangaea locks most of the world's land into one great mass, and trapped within its interior lies a vast expanse of climatic monotony. You trudge across barren plains where the only sign of life is tough, slow-growing plants, adapted to cling on beneath scorching skies. This was a time when Earth's climate wasn't just harsh, it was extreme. The late Triassic atmosphere was thick with carbon dioxide, pushing temperatures higher than what many creatures can handle today. The air is often dry, and seasonal rainfall, if it existed, was brief and erratic. Large parts of Pangaea's interior were shaped by monsoonal shifts, but nothing like the consistent heavy rains you're about to experience soon. Before the Carnian Pluvial, the planet leans heavily toward aridity. The vegetation you see here is almost minimal by comparison to what's about to come: scrubby conifers, ferns holding on to isolated wetter spots, and hardy seed plants borrowed from even older times. It's a world where plant life strains just to survive, where water scarcity is a constant and fire-prone landscapes dominate. Think of the deserts of today, only magnified across millions of square kilometers. What's fascinating is that this long, dry spell set the stage for the planet's radical shift. It's as if Earth had been holding its breath, caught in a heat trap before something snapped. Some researchers say that the prolonged dryness made ecosystems fragile and primed for collapse once wetter conditions took over. You might not associate rain with chaos, but the sudden onset of a widespread pluvial event shakes the fragile balance of life on land and sea. Interestingly, fossils from before this rainstorm show ecosystems that are very different. Dominant groups present before the event disappear afterward, like ancient amphibians and certain reptiles. The dry climate limited biodiversity in many ways, but historians still argue whether this pre-pluvial dryness was uniform worldwide or more variable. Some data hints that coastal areas might have been wetter or seasonally variable even then, but the overarching story is one of drought and heat. You also notice curious sediment layers in rocks from this period, mud cracks and salt deposits revealing evaporation's dominance. These geological clues paint a picture of water scarcity that's about to be flipped on its head. So you stand at the edge, just before the storm. The late Triassic sun beats down, but clouds are gathering. Soon, rain, lots of it, will flood this world, transforming its climate, vegetation, and life forms in ways no one fully understands yet. Just imagine how the dry, cracked earth will soon be soaked, how plants will respond to the deluge, and how animals will be forced to adjust or flee. This landscape is poised for upheaval, and you're here to witness it. You watch as the first thick clouds gather on the horizon, signaling that the calm dryness is about to be swallowed by a storm of epic proportions. This is the calm before the Carnian Pluvial, the event that some scientists believe was triggered by gargantuan volcanic eruptions releasing massive quantities of greenhouse gases. Picture titanic fissures in the Earth's crust, pouring out flood basalts over thousands of square kilometers, like the wrath of titans venting their fury. These eruptions might have hurled enough carbon dioxide and sulfur dioxide into the atmosphere to kick Earth's climate into overdrive. But volcanic activity isn't the only suspect here. Atmospheric carbon levels, tracked via carbon isotope ratios and sediment layers, spike sharply at this time. This sudden surge hints at complex feedback loops involving the oceans, atmosphere, and biosphere. Are these carbon spikes the cause or the effect? Historians and geoscientists still argue this point heatedly. Some claim it was volcanic CO2 causing warming and wetness. Others suggest that increased organic decay from newly submerged or waterlogged areas flooded with life was releasing carbon, turning the atmosphere sticky and unstable. And then there's the shifting of continents themselves. Pangaea was not exactly frozen in place. Tectonic nudges changed ocean circulation and wind patterns subtly but crucially, setting the stage for elevated humid conditions. The rearrangement of landmass caused moisture to linger rather than disperse. So it's not a simple story. Volcanic eruptions, atmospheric chemistry changes, and continental shifts all conspired, locked in a complicated dance that ramped up rainfall for millions of years. You might find it quirky that amidst such massive earth-shaking changes, a strange little critter called a conodont, a tiny eel-like jawless fish, left behind chemical clues locked in its fossilized teeth during this time. These clues act like ancient thermometers and telltales to researchers, revealing temperature and oxygen shifts. You can think of these tiny fossils as nature's own reporters, quietly narrating the frenzy of chemical changes beneath the surface. The volcanic eruptions, especially from the Rangelia large igneous province, produced vast flood basalts covering present-day western North America. Think of volumes of molten rock pouring out for hundreds of thousands of years, massive enough to stain the sky with ash and gas, poisoning air and water. This release led to acid rain, disrupting ecosystems already under stress from shifting climates. Historians still debate whether the Carnian Pluvial was a purely volcanic climate event or additionally linked to extraterrestrial influences. Some fringe theories even speculate about asteroid impacts stirring atmospheric havoc simultaneously, although this remains speculative with limited evidence. What's not debatable is the rain came, stayed, and changed everything. So, standing in the middle of this ancient drama, you're witnessing Earth's raw power, volcanoes erupting, atmospheric chemistry flipping, continents nudging, and the sky opening up for a relentless downpour that will last over 2 million years. This isn't just weather, it's planetary reboot mode in full swing. As the rain begins, it doesn't just drizzle or sprinkle, it pours with a relentless fury that redefines everything. You stand beneath a sky swollen with heavy clouds, feeling each drop as it hammers the leaves and saturates the thick soil. Rivers that once meandered dry and timidly through the landscape now rage as torrents, bursting their banks and washing away entire ecosystems. Floodplains spread far and wide, drowning habitats once too arid for much life. The Carnian Pluvial Event isn't a mere localized seasonal storm. It's a planet-wide drencher lasting nearly 2 million years, where rain falls with unyielding consistency. Imagine weather systems spinning endlessly, unleashing endless monsoons over vast stretches of Pangaea. The relentless moisture fuels dense fogs, swampy marshes, and shallow inland seas in areas that never had standing water before. The very shape of continents' coastlines altered as sea levels rose from increased rainfall and melting highland ice. This prolonged flooding disrupted sedimentation patterns visible in rock layers today. You can almost hear the distant roar of continuous downpour. The land pulses with flooded forests, with fallen trees floating in sluggish waters. Creatures that once dwelled in dry soil or rocky outcrops now have to navigate waterlogged ground or adapt to new aquatic or semi-aquatic lifestyles. As habitats shift, competition heats up. Some species drown or lose territory, while others seize the opportunity to expand. One fascinating, somewhat quirky discovery scientists have made shows that crocodile ancestors during this period might have used their own dung as a sunscreen or bug repellent. Yeah, you heard it right. These animals tolerated and innovated ways to survive amidst the moist, buggy, and sometimes itchy environment. It's little tidbits like these that add surprising texture to this vast paleoclimate puzzle. The torrential rains triggered massive soil erosion and transport of sediments into rivers and oceans, which in turn affected nutrient cycles, sometimes starving marine life, other times fueling blooms that spiraled out of control. The chaos wasn't just on land. The seas were stirred up in a frenzy of biological adjustments. Historians still argue whether the intensity of rainfall was evenly spread worldwide. Some sediment records suggest that certain tropical regions experienced extreme wetness, while more temperate areas were moderately humid, with fluctuating dry and wet spells. But the general consensus paints a picture of a wetter, stormier Earth compared to the arid Triassic that preceded it. As you trudge through this ancient, soaked world, it's clear you're witnessing not just a rainstorm, but an extended climate revolution. The landscape floods, dries, and floods again, testing life's resilience with every splash and slide. Long-term rainfall like this rewires ecosystems, opening doors for evolutionary shifts as species scramble to catch a breath amid the deluge. Amid all that relentless rain and flooding, it's the plants that first tell the story of survival. You find yourself wandering damp, shadowy forests thickened by the Carnian Pluvial's gifts and challenges. Picture lush tree ferns, towering conifers, and early relatives of modern cycads sprouting everywhere, their leaves dripping with moisture. These ancient plants respond to the wetter conditions with a burst of growth, blanketing what had been desert-like land with dense vegetation. Some species flourished, spreading quickly in the newfound humidity. Ferns, for example, exploded in diversity and abundance, capitalizing on the soggy soil. Meanwhile, conifers, evergreens with sturdy needles and cones, adapted to the new climate by developing tougher bark and root systems to withstand waterlogged ground. These trees laid the groundwork for forests that would come to dominate much of the Mesozoic world. But not all plants danced in the rain's blessing. The Carnian Pluvial also meant that many drought-adapted species, those that had thrived under the long Triassic sun, began to suffer. Seed plants that favored dry, harsh conditions found themselves outcompeted or forced to relocate. It's a classic tale of winners and losers in evolutionary terms, Nature's version of musical chairs, only wetter. Here's a quirky twist. A type of ancient fungi often found fossilized among these plants is hypothesized to have formed early symbiotic relationships, similar to modern mycorrhizae. These fungi helped plants absorb nutrients more efficiently in the soggy, shifting soils. So, while the plants were busy growing, they had fungal allies underground quietly boosting their odds of survival. Not a bad team-up amidst a 2-million-year storm. The Carnian Pluvial also altered fire regimes. Fires had been common and frequent during dry Triassic times, helping maintain open landscapes. But with all that moisture, fires diminished significantly. Fires are like nature's reset buttons, and their decline meant denser forests could establish themselves more fully, changing animal habitats. Historians still argue about the extent to which these wet conditions affected plant diversity globally. Some fossil pollen studies show regional exceptions where dryness lingered or where wet-to-dry cycles repeated. This complexity meant plant communities were never static, but continually adjusting to fluctuating rainfall and temperature patterns. As you push through these ancient forests, you realize the critical role plants played during this wet upheaval. They redefined land profiles, fueled atmospheric oxygen shifts, and created habitats where new animals could thrive. You see, the Carnian Pluvial isn't just a rainstorm. It's a botanical revolution that sculpted Earth's green mantle in profound ways. Next time you admire a forest's peacefulness, remember that long ago it was born in a world battered not by gentle rains, but by a relentless, planet-shaking downpour. Now shift your gaze from the forests drowning in rain to the seas that roared and churned in response. Picture vast, shallow shorelines swelling into inland seas as the relentless Carnian Pluvial flooded margins and basins. The oceans didn't just sit still, they roiled under changed chemistry and currents, responding heartbreakingly, and sometimes violently, to this planetary deluge. You dive underwater with ancient marine creatures, feeling the water temperature fluctuate and oxygen levels shift. The prolonged rains washed nutrients and sediments into the seas in unprecedented volumes, altering the delicate marine balance. Coastal waters turned murkier, thicker with suspended particles, challenging sunlight penetration and photosynthesis. This change disrupted plankton blooms, those tiny but mighty oceanic plants fueling the marine food web. Some plankton types vanished, replaced by hardier, more resilient species that could tolerate the murky conditions. When plankton faltered, everything above them felt the ripple. Small marine invertebrates saw food sources dwindle, and that meant the entire chain was affected. One of the quirkier tales here is about ammonoids, relatives of modern squids and octopuses that thrived amidst this chaos. These shelled creatures, adorned with intricate spiral shells, skyrocketed in diversity, racing to fill niches left vacant by others. Ammonoids serve as excellent index fossils for the Carnian Pluvial, helping paleontologists drill down into precisely when these storms drowned and revived specific marine biotas. On the downside, the event triggered several marine extinctions, although not as dramatically as the famous Permian or later Cretaceous events. Corals, for example, suffered notable losses, possibly because their calcium carbonate skeletons struggled to form amid fluctuating water chemistry and acidity. Reef systems, essential marine hubs of biodiversity, collapsed in certain areas, leading to prolonged periods without their structural support. Historians and marine paleontologists still debate the magnitude of these marine upheavals. Some argue that the pluvial effects were global, while others suggest a stronger regional impact associated primarily with the Tethys Ocean region, an ancient equatorial sea where many fossil records originate. These differing views hinge largely on data gaps from remote or currently inaccessible seabeds. The ocean's oxygen levels also went through swing phases during this time. You may recall hearing about anoxic events, where oxygen plunges so low that many species suffocate or are forced into refuge zones. The Carnian Pluvial likely triggered smaller, more localized anoxic pockets, weakening marine communities and stressing survival. So, as you float through these ancient waters, you sense how a rainstorm on land is never just local. It has cascading effects reaching deep into the seas, rearranging marine life just as profoundly as forests on land. The Carnian rains stirred Earth's oceans like a giant spoon in a cocktail, mixing, shifting, and forcing life underwater to recalibrate its place in an ever-changing world. You pull yourself out of the water and back onto land to meet the most dramatic cast of characters affected by the Carnian Pluvial, the animals. Imagine a sprawling theater of life, where the curtain rises on the winners and losers of this epic wet drama. The prolonged rains created shifting habitats, forcing some species toward extinction while opening doors for others to thrive. Many large amphibians, once rulers of wetter terrains, suffered heavy losses. Their thick skin and semi-aquatic lifestyles depended on specific moist environments, which the massive floods disrupted by altering waterways and swamp ecosystems. As these amphibians dwindled, reptiles began stepping into the limelight. Early archosaurs, a reptile group that includes your soon-to-be famous dinosaurs, crocodilians, and pterosaurs, started diversifying and expanding. What's especially fascinating is how some smaller reptiles adapted to changing conditions by evolving new diets and behaviors. This adaptability gave them an edge over creatures reliant on older ecosystems. For instance, some early dinosaur relatives began exploiting new food sources emerging in wetter biomes. This shift highlights a general pattern in mass environmental upheavals. Flexibility often trumps old dominance. On the quirky side, scientists discovered fossil burrows from this time filled with coprolites, fossilized droppings, rich in evidence of diets shifting rapidly. Imagine creatures munching on plants, insects, or even other animals previously ignored. These fossils open windows into survival strategies during ecological stress, showing you that ancient animals, much like us, improvised when forced to. Historians and paleontologists still argue about how quickly ecosystems recovered after the pluvial's peak wet phases. Some evidence suggests a patchwork of refuges, pockets where life hung on in marginally suitable conditions, while other areas saw total species turnovers. This patchiness probably helped shape the mosaic of life that followed. Plus, the Carnian Pluvial gave rise to many modern reptile lineages, setting evolutionary trajectories that resonate even today. This period was essentially an evolutionary reset button, wiping out many Triassic species and paving the way for Mesozoic dominance by dinosaurs and their relatives. As you walk amid this ancient reshuffling, you almost feel the pressure building on species forced to adapt or die. It's a fascinating, much messier story than the textbook Dinosaur Rise oversimplification. Instead, the Carnian Pluvial is this messy but amazing transitional stage where life's endless improvisation shines in full force. You're now standing on the very edge of one of history's great evolutionary moments, the moment when the dinosaurs began their slow but unstoppable rise. The Carnian Pluvial Event didn't just storm through the planet's weather systems, it rewired life's evolutionary wiring, paving the way for these iconic creatures to grab their foothold. Picture a world where changing landscapes and shifting climates create new evolutionary opportunities almost overnight. As ancient species struggled or vanished, the dinosaurs and their close relatives began their quiet takeover. Thanks to adaptations like efficient respiratory systems, upright postures, and smart locomotion, early dinosaurs were primed to take advantage of newly opened niches created by this climatic upheaval. You might be surprised to learn that the dinosaurs didn't immediately explode in numbers or diversity post-pluvial. Instead, their rise was a slow burn, taking place over millions of years. The rainstorm destabilized older competitors, clearing the playing field while forcing life to invent new survival tricks. Early specimens like Herrerasaurus or Eoraptor, small and nimble, were among the first pioneers testing these new conditions. Quirkily enough, studies of dinosaur fossils from this time show evidence of rapid growth rates, perhaps a response to environmental pressures, a kind of evolutionary adrenaline. These growth spurts may have offered an edge in escaping predators or reproducing efficiently in unstable climates. Historians still debate whether the Carnian Pluvial directly triggered dinosaur dominance, or if it was just one of multiple factors contributing to their eventual rise. Some argue that the event sped up dinosaur radiation, while others think it was a lucky break amid broader Mesozoic trends. Whatever the case, you can't deny this rainstorm reshaped Earth's ecosystems and pushed the evolutionary seesaw firmly in dinosaurs' favor. Also notable is how the wet conditions allowed certain plant species favored by herbivorous dinosaurs to flourish, creating stable food sources and fostering diverse dinosaur communities. This interplay between plants and animals underlines the interconnectedness of ecosystems, even hundreds of millions of years ago. As you watch the first dinosaurs exploring lush, rain-soaked landscapes, you realize this story is more than just survival. It's about resilience, innovation, and the subtle domino effect that 2 million years of rain had on reshaping Earth's biological destiny. The Carnian Pluvial wasn't just a bad weather day, it was the dawn of an entirely new age. Now let's take a deep breath together, literally, and think about the air you're breathing over 200 million years ago during the Carnian Pluvial. The atmosphere itself was shifting in ways you might not have realized could impact evolution so directly. Oxygen levels, carbon dioxide concentrations, and other gases came and went in fluctuating waves thanks to the planet's drowning landscapes and shifting plant life. Picture the effects of rising CO2 mixed with plunging oxygen, a cocktail that stresses most animals but opens doors for others. During this wet event, scientists believe oxygen levels dipped just enough to scare some big creatures out of their comfort zones, forcing smaller, more efficient species to blossom. The oxygen partial pressure influences not only animal metabolism, but also how large those creatures can grow. Intriguingly, fossil evidence shows a small yet persistent shift in atmospheric composition, reflected in isotopic records stored in ancient soils and sediments. These records help scientists reconstruct how carbon and oxygen cycled through the Earth's atmosphere-ocean system, painting a detailed picture of an atmosphere in flux. A quirky tidbit here is how researchers suspect that declining oxygen may have encouraged the evolution of more efficient respiratory systems, think bird-like lungs in some archosaurs, long before birds themselves appeared. This adaptation would later help dinosaurs conquer diverse environments. Historians and geochemists still debate how dramatic these atmospheric shifts really were, and how directly they influenced evolution. Some argue that oxygen changes were regional or short-lived, while others see a more global, sustained pulse influencing life's diversification. It's a scholarly puzzle still pieced together by tiny chemical clues. Beyond oxygen, rising atmospheric moisture contributed to cloud formation and rain intensity, making the Carnian Pluvial a feedback loop of its own. More rain meant more plant growth. More plants meant changes in soil chemistry and gas exchange. These cycles shaped not only what you'd see on land, but the very air itself, altering breathing conditions and perhaps even climate regulation. So, as you ponder this ancient atmosphere, thick with unknown gases and swirling moisture, remember, evolution doesn't occur in isolation. It's an intimate dance between the planet's air, water, soils, and its many living inhabitants, all marching forward, rain or shine. You bend down to examine the rocks beneath your feet, and suddenly you realize fossils from the Carnian Pluvial Event aren't just ancient bones and leaves. They're time capsules packed with secrets about Earth's turbulent transformation. These fossils, embedded in layers of sediment woven through periods of rain and dryness, reveal striking details about life's adaptations and struggles. Take the sudden appearance of abundant fossilized spores and pollen grains, scattering clues across rock strata. They tell stories of plants reacting to wet conditions, a spike in fern spores, for instance, highlighting their explosive growth when moisture flourished. You can almost picture these tiny ancient spores floating on humid winds, settling into mudflats and riverbanks, ready to start anew. What's delightfully quirky is that paleontologists sometimes find fossilized insect burrows and even fungus-like organisms resembling modern slime molds trapped in amber or rock, offering a window into the micro-world, teeming beneath dense canopies during heavy rains. These small, often overlooked players played huge roles in nutrient cycling during the pluvial's forested and swampy landscapes. The fossil record also captures key evolutionary milestones, like the first widespread appearances of dinosaurs, identifiable in sediment layers dating to the post-pluvial period. This rapid diversification is etched in fossilized footprints and skeletal remains, recorded alongside other reptile forms that waned or flourished during this shift. Historians still debate how continuous these fossil signals are. Some sedimentary layers are interrupted by dry spells, suggesting pulses of wet and dry rather than one unbroken rainstorm. This pulsating climate likely caused fluctuating environments where species had to constantly adapt or perish, adding a layer of complexity to the evolutionary narrative. Fossils also show signs of stress, such as growth rings in wood revealing years of slower development, perhaps during drier interludes or flood recovery phases. This fine-grained record of ancient climate fluctuations has become a keystone for understanding the event's pace and scale. So, when you stroll through a museum or dig through fossil beds linked to the Carnian Pluvial Event, remember, you're not just looking at old bones or leaves. You're holding fragments of Earth's atmospheric and ecological upheaval, nature's own diary, chronicling 2 million years of relentless rain and extraordinary change. You might think a 2 million-year rainstorm would soak the whole planet evenly, but the story is far more complicated. Historians and geologists still argue whether the Carnian pluvial was truly global or just regional, mainly affecting parts of Pangaea and its surrounding seas. As you explore sediment records worldwide, you find evidence both for and against a planet-wide downpour. For one, the thick, rain-altered sediment layers and fossil plants indicating humid conditions are concentrated in the northern and tropical parts of Pangaea, especially around what's now Europe, North America, and parts of South America. These regions show clear signs of sustained wetness, with coal deposits and freshwater sediments backing up the story. You imagine lush swamps and recurrent floods dominating these ancient landscapes. Yet, when you venture towards Eastern Asia or certain parts of southern Gondwana, the evidence becomes patchy. Sediments there suggest periods of drought or alternating wet-dry cycles rather than constant rain. This regional variability fuels scholarly debate about how far-reaching the pluvial really was. Some scientists propose that the event was a strong monsoon intensification rather than a global rainstorm, creating wet belts and dry zones. Others argue that the limitations of geological sampling and preservation bias leave us with an incomplete picture, making the global or regional distinction hard to pin down. Adding a quirky footnote, researchers have discovered red beds, oxidized, iron-rich soil layers, from this time in various places. These tell tales of intermittent dry phases within the overall wet period, hinting at a less uniform climate than you might expect. So, the Carnian pluvial might best be seen as a series of volcanic and climate-driven weather extremes with varying intensity across different zones. This ongoing debate is a reminder that Earth's climate history isn't neatly packaged, but complex and multidimensional. You get a sense that even ancient geologists, the rocks and fossils themselves, are whispering sometimes contradictory tales that demand careful interpretation. As you puzzle over this complexity, you realize that understanding ancient climate events like the Carnian pluvial requires piecing together a global jigsaw where some pieces are missing, others overlap oddly, but the overall picture reveals a dynamic and transformative period on Earth. You're somewhere between the ancient past and the present, noticing how this massive rainfall event from over 230 million years ago still resonates loudly in today's climate conversations. The Carnian Pluvial Event, despite its age, offers valuable lessons about abrupt climate change, ecosystem disruptions, and possible extinction risks that feel eerily familiar in our modern world. The relentless rains and flooding from the pluvial reset ecosystems much like today's extreme weather events, rearrange habitats and species distributions. Scientists study this ancient event closely to understand how rapid climate shifts impact biodiversity, resilience, and recovery. You begin drawing parallels between ancient flooding, increased atmospheric CO2, and the concern we face today with global warming and extreme rainfall patterns. Here's a quirky connection. Ancient pollen and spores from this period sometimes show early appearances of drought-resistant plant traits, a kind of evolutionary foreshadowing that plants were already adapting to increasingly unpredictable climates. In our own age, similar adaptations are cropping up in modern flora struggling with shifting weather norms. Historians and climatologists still debate whether the Carnian Pluvial can be used as a direct analog for future climate scenarios or if it represents a unique pattern unlikely to repeat. Some argue the scale and drivers were totally different, while others see clear shared mechanisms of feedback involving atmospheric gases and biosphere responses. The event also raises questions about species' abilities to survive and adapt during rapid environmental change, spotlighting the concept of climate refugia, pockets of environmental stability that may allow some species to persist through hardship. This concept is vital today as conservationists work against extinction risks linked to habitat loss and climate change. As you think about the seemingly endless reign of the Carnian Pluvial, you realize that ancient climate catastrophes are not just relics of the past, they're cautionary tales wrapped in sediment and fossils. They remind us how delicate Earth's balance can be, how quickly life must scramble to adapt, and sometimes fail. Understanding these lessons helps you appreciate the urgency and complexity of addressing modern climate challenges while respecting the resilience coded deep within life's blueprint. You're now entering the quieter corners of this ancient world, far from the thunderous rainstorms and turbulent seas, to meet some of the less celebrated but equally important creatures that lived during the Carnian Pluvial. While dinosaurs were beginning to make their mark, other reptiles, amphibians, and early mammal ancestors were quietly evolving alongside them, adapting in their own fascinating ways. The swampy, wet landscapes created niches for many diverse reptile groups beyond the dinosaurs. Early crocodilomorphs, relatives of modern crocodiles, began exploiting semi-aquatic habitats, becoming efficient swimmers and hunters in rivers and lake margins. Their adaptability to these new environments meant they could survive the fluctuating conditions that wiped out less versatile species. Amphibians, despite declines among some large species, still thrived in microhabitats where they could avoid the worst of the flooding. You can imagine small labyrinthodonts living in puddles or slow-moving streams, their life cycles tightly tied to water's availability. These creatures reminded nature that even in chaos, persistent life finds a way. A quirky tidbit: fossils of early mammal-like reptiles or cynodonts show evidence of fur-like structures. This suggests they may have begun developing insulation to cope with cooler, wetter nights brought on by the Carnian Pluvial's disturbed climate, precursors to the warm-blooded mammals millions of years later. Historians and evolutionary biologists still debate the pace and significance of these mammal ancestors' adaptations during this period. Some argue that the pluvial pushed them to innovate rapidly, while others suggest smaller climate fluctuations had more impact over time. Either way, these quiet evolutionary experiments laid the groundwork for mammalian success after the dinosaurs' reign. As you imagine the diversity thriving beneath the rain-soaked canopy or skulking in damp riverbanks, you realize how the Carnian Pluvial wasn't just about dinosaurs or forests. It was a time of widespread biological innovation, where many branches of the tree of life shifted, adapted, or withered, influencing the complex tapestry of life that continues to unfold today. And here you are, standing at the edge of the Carnian Pluvial's final act, the slow lifting of the sky's soggy burden and the dawn of a reshaped Earth. The relentless rain ceases, but the planet you return to is irrevocably changed. Forests once drowned are now sprawling anew, ancient deserts replaced by lush landscapes brimming with life, and the blueprint for the Mesozoic era's biological tapestry lies freshly drawn. As the humid clouds break apart, ecosystems enter recovery and renewal phases. New species continue their slow expansion, filling niches cleared by the storm's chaos. Dinosaurs, already budding stars, grow into dominant players across diverse habitats. Meanwhile, other groups carve out specialized roles, reshaping food webs and ecological interactions. You observe how soils enriched by millennia of flooding support robust plant growth, allowing vast coniferous forests to spread. This stabilization of land surfaces reduces erosion, aiding clearer freshwater systems and diverse aquatic habitats. The Earth's carbon cycles begin to rebalance as vegetation draws down atmospheric CO2, cooling parts of the planet over time. Yet this period isn't static. The aftermath of the pluvial event pulses with evolutionary experimentation. Species radiate and sometimes retreat in response to ongoing climate oscillations. The legacy of this 2-million-year storm lingers, setting evolutionary trajectories that influence life's patterns for millions of years more. A quirky fossil find from this time, giant petrified tree trunks overturned and preserved in volcanic ash beds, offers a rare snapshot of this transition, showing that even massive forest giants were not immune to climatic upheavals. They fell, were buried, and became immortalized reminders of nature's delicate dance with change. Historians debate the precise timing and length of this recovery, but consensus holds that the Carnian Pluvial marks a clear boundary between older Triassic worlds and the Mesozoic era's rising biodiversity. It's the moment Earth's life took a giant leap forward, riding the aftermath of a planet-sized rainstorm. As you watch the sun break through clearing skies, illuminating a world both ancient and reborn, you understand this event's profound place in Earth's story, a washout that watered the roots of the world's most famous creatures and reshaped the face of life itself. You've journeyed through the endless rain and tumult of the Carnian Pluvial Event, and now it's time to slow down together. Imagine the sky clearing softly, the storm's roar fading into a gentle, persistent drip, like nature's own lullaby. The muddy earth begins to dry, releasing faint scents of damp wood and fresh leaves as the forests cautiously reclaim their foothold. In this quiet pause, you feel the world easing into balance once more, relief spreading through ecosystems battered by relentless floodwaters. Leaves shimmer with lingering droplets. Birds, that tiny but eternal chorus, begin tentative songs, and distant rivers return from their swollen fury to gentle flows. It is a moment of fragile peace, nature's breath before the next act in its vast, unfolding story. Your mind drifts with the slow trickle of memories, plants pushing shoots through wet soil, ancient reptiles adapting step by step, oceans stirring beneath murky surfaces. The planet, resilient and enduring, reminds you that even after the most sweeping changes, life gently persists, shaping, evolving, and carrying on. As you settle deeper into this calm, the boundaries between past and present blur, and you remember that the great rainstorm wasn't just a catastrophe. It was a creative force, a reset button pressed deep in Earth's history. The ripple effects of those million-year rains pulse quietly beneath every forest canopy and under every fossil bed. Now, breathe in slowly. Match the rhythm of dripping leaves and rustling branches, and let your thoughts drift like soft clouds on a clearing sky. When you wake from this story and open your eyes, you carry with you a quiet wonder, a gentle awareness of Earth's deep past and its endless capacity for renewal.